G'day fans of the PPL, it is the Verd back with you again. Welcome to week 7 of D1's Power Rankings. Of course, I am not alone. I'm joined by my lovely co-host Trev CL.
Yo, what is going on, guys? This is your boy Trev CL, and yep, another fantastic week of PPL Power Rankings.
Now, just a few things to quickly address before we start this Power Rankings. One, do apologise for the lack of week 6 Power Rankings. Trevor and I were both very busy. Personal life does sometimes take a bit of precedence to Pokemon, unfortunately, and we just didn't have the time to get it uploaded, so we decided to try and kind of cover as much as we could in this Power Ranking, as well as that one. So if you're a bit confused as to how some of these teams are further up than they should be, then we'll kind of explain it a little bit more. Secondly, the audio quality is probably not going to be the best. We've been having a lot of internet issues, so the best way we've been able to make this work is just kind of both recording on our phones. So we're going to see how this goes. I think it should turn out okay. Hopefully you guys are able to. We're trying to do our best that we can to get you guys this content, because currently both of our internets right now are not handling it too well. But is there anything else we need to cover with the disclaimer notes?
No, I think we are ready to just launch straight into these rankings.
Alright, let's get to it. So starting with obviously bottom place still being Jordan and the Southampton Sneasels. Obviously just struggling to find that first win. I mean, can we come in that he had a tough matchup this week against Jolt, and obviously last week against Betterjack. So really tough opponents for him to be going up against. Especially Jolt, who, is just starting to really get a handle on his team. I think, next week is also going to be more of a challenge for Jordan against Shardy. But, the thing is, he's not like, a lot of these matches, although he's bottom, they're not really like big blowouts. Like, they're very competitive games, and he's definitely bringing out the best of these coaches that maybe would feel going up against the bottom team would be a really easy win. But I think Jordan's proving that he's, putting in more of an effort than meets the eye. But I do believe, anything you want to say about Jordan right now, Trev?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, despite him being 0-7, he might be one of the best winless coaches I've seen in terms of his skill, because despite being 0-7, he's put up a pretty good show. Honestly, there's a couple of people above him that I think Jordan has had really closer matches than some of these coaches, and I think if that continues this way, he's sure to at least pick up a win or two. It's quite unfortunate because now he only has 4 weeks, so even if he finishes 4-7, his chances of escaping relegation at this point are slim to none. So that's rather unfortunate, but maybe if he gets lucky enough, he can possibly get into that playoff game between the third best of the D2.
For sure. Moving on to the next team we have here in the Canberra True Cannons. It's been a bit tough for Colton lately. Back-to-back weeks, we lost obviously 4-0 last week to the Seattle Onyx, and then this week going down 2-0 to Mono. Obviously, two very good competitors, especially Mono, who's performing quite well this season. It has been a bit of a challenge for Colton. I guess the question that has to be asked potentially is, would he have done better if he drafted his own team from the start? But then again, I would never be one to go against Trav and his ability of drafting. So I think that Colton's done the best that he can with a team that maybe he's not as familiar with. And again, the same thing with Jordan, he's putting in really good performances most weeks. Obviously the 4-0 the other week wasn't that great, but against Mono, who is a player that can absolutely blow out teams, to be able to pull it to a 2-0, quite a close game, I think it's really commendable for him.
Yeah. There's always been this thing with Colton, with people sometimes question his plays, and I agree that every game there's at least 1 or 2 really questionable plays that I don't quite agree with, and I think in the beginning those weren't hurting him. In fact, they might have actually been helping him. But it seems lately that those questionable plays are coming back to bite him, and I think that's a big reason for his recent slide down the rankings, down the standings, and possibly into D2 for next season.
For sure. But moving on to, I'm going to cover I reckon these 3 teams we can kind of cover at the same time because they have them all in the same spot. But we have the Norwich Skitty in 10th, the Buffalo Bills in 9th, and the Seattle Onyx in 8th. Now, is it the bottom 3 teams that get relegated from D1?
Bottom 2 get automatically relegated, and then the third to last place, the third best team from D2, in a 1-game playoff that decides who is in D1 the next season, who's in D2.
Because I feel like it's really between Seattle, the Bills, and the Skinny for that last little spot there. It's going to be very, very close between all of them. Obviously, looking at their last couple of weeks, the Skinny did get a win in week 6, but then had to go up against Ruby, who's in incredible form despite coming off that loss last week. Still performing exceptionally well. So it's going for them 1 win, 1 loss. And then you look at the Buffalo Bills, who came off not only losing against Mono, but then following up with a loss against Paul. Obviously, 2 very good opponents, but Will has proven that even against the tough opponents, he can pull out the results. So, still very unfortunate for him to lose there. And then obviously, Eric with the Seattle Onyx, he is probably the best out of the 3 here, picking up back-to-back wins, obviously over Colton and Jack. So, he's performing, or New Jack, he's performing really, really well right now. I think he's starting to get the hang of the team. I don't know what's changed in the last couple of weeks, because obviously, first week he performed really well, then he was on a bit of a slump for, I believe, 4 weeks in a row. So it's good to see him starting to turn this around, 3 and 4. I think if he just keeps up this momentum, I could definitely see him pushing himself above that relegation battle. He has Better Jack next week, and that's going to be a really important game for both of them. Out of those 3 teams, Trev, who do you feel is the most in danger of fighting for that relegation spot?
It's really tough to say. I would probably have to go with Jack, Don Fanatic Jack, as it just seems that lately nothing has been really going his way. With Will and Eric, they've been very, very streaky this season, and while Will is kind of going in a downward streak while Eric's going in an upward streak, I do think that Will can turn it around the last few weeks and avoid that relegation spot, because he's done it before when he started 0-2 and then rattled off 3 wins in a row. It's, again, really tough to say, but looking at the streaks, it's kind of looking like Eric and Will are going to be able to escape the last relegation spot, whereas Jack is looking kind of grim for him.
For sure. But we are going to move on here to another group of 3, I guess we can talk about. We have them all in different positions here, but I guess it's, again, one of those situations where they're all in the same kind of group. They're all performing about the same, so it's really just coming down to preference here. But the teams I'm talking about, obviously, the West Coast Wing Goals, the Melbourne Victory Star, and the Tampa Bay Luxray. So I have New Jack in 7th. You have Paul there. I've been, honestly, the last couple of weeks, very, very, I want to say surprised by his performance, especially that match against Ruby, where he pulled off that 4-0 win in week 6. That was a massive upset I didn't expect. But then he followed up that massive upset. He's been on a really good run. Don't get me wrong. He won against Kelly, won against Jordan, won against Ruby, but then came off a 3-0 loss to Eric. So you were talking about streaky players, and definitely it feels like that's kind of been how New Jack's been going with all this stuff. Is it New Jack? Better Jack? What Jack?
Better Jack. Either one.
There's so many Jacks, man. It's just... Anyway,
yeah.
Jack, he's been doing well. Don't get me wrong. Some of these victories are very commendable, but at the same time, he's got a lot of tough matchups coming up. For instance, he has Mono next week, and then obviously the week after, he's up against Will, who's fighting for that relegation spot. So it's going to be tough for him. I think he should be safe from relegation. I think he's been performing well enough lately to save himself. But definitely, I think right now he's in a very dicey position. But obviously, a person that you have him a little bit higher than that, and one person you have a bit lower is Paul for the West Coast Wing Goals. How do you feel, again, talking about streaky players, but how do you think he's been performing?
Well, the thing about Paul is, just like Will, he's been super streaky. He had the same type of first 5 games where he started 0-2, went 3-2, and then ran into kind of a brick wall in week 6. Very similar to Will's season, actually. The difference is he was able to turn it around in week 7 with a win. And that's just honestly the biggest difference for me between both seasons. Obviously, Paul being 4-3 and Will being 3-4. But while Paul is looking pretty good on escaping the relegation zone, one more win will most likely get him out of that third to last place spot. Definitely 2 more wins. He's going to probably need to win out if he wants to win that title. And while it's possible that all 3 of Mono, Kelly, and Ruby will lose at least 1 or 2 more games, it's very likely also that one of them could win now. And not looking too good for Paul. And that's the main reason I kind of have him lower than either Mono or Jack, just because Mono does have a 5-2 record, and I believe. Let me check Jack's differential. I believe yes, Jack has 4 differential versus Paul's 2, so it's gonna be kind of tough for Paul to catch up to the big boys like Kelly, who has 8, and Ruby, who has 6. But I have faith that Paul can definitely escape the relegation zone, which he's not even close to that now. But if he was to go on a losing streak, it could jeopardize his D1 season. But right now, out of those group of 3, I have Mono the highest, just because Mono does have one more win than Jack and Paul.
Yeah, for sure. I think the big thing with Paul that really damaged him was that 5-0 loss to Shardy. That's just ruined his differential. But I guess I have him above Mono. I just feel that Paul, this is more looking like in general. I think Paul's last 4 weeks look a little bit more favourable than Mono's. I just see him maybe picking up a couple more wins and maybe pushing himself in front. But at the same time, like I said, with all these 3 coaches, I see them all finishing around the same area. They're all about the same level. I feel right now, yes, Mono is 1 win ahead of them, but he definitely has some tough matches coming up. I mean, next week is Jack versus Mono, so that's going to be very interesting to see how that one turns out. But it's good to see that even at this mid to late stage of the season, it is still incredibly tight in all areas, I guess, of the rankings. We are going to move on to the top 4. And if you couldn't already guess who the top 4 are, now you can obviously make it very clear. And I mean, again, it's 2 teams we have in different orders. I think these ones, again, it's just the same as all the ones we've done. They're very, very similar. They're both performing, I'd say, at about the same level. And again, I think it just comes down to preference. I know that you, for most of the season, have been enjoying Shardy, and obviously you had him first last week. And I guess I just, my reasoning, I suppose, for putting Jolt above Shardy this week is, I thought Jolt, performed really well against Jordan, got his win, and Shardy, he really needed to get that win over Kelly. That was a massive game for both of them, and Kelly was able to come up trumps, and a few times now, as we were talking about it with Paul and others, when Shardy's gone up against a couple of the big guys so far, the big guys have prevailed. So I don't know if that's going to be, something to watch out for in the future or not, but it's definitely not boding well for Shardy in his, championship run per se. But I think, again, both of these teams very evenly matched. I mean, Jolt next week has a very, very tough matchup against Ruby, whereas, Shardy has what some would consider a more favourable matchup against Jordan, but you never know what's going to happen with those games. But yeah, like I said, very, very down the middle. But obviously, I'm sure you have your reasons for having Shardy above Jolt.
Yeah, well, obviously, again, there's the differential thing, which, Shardy is 2 ahead of Jolt, and, I mean, having 4 differential when the current first place person has 8 differential versus having 2 differential is huge, because you're talking about, really, you only need to get a 4-0 or 5-0 to get within reach of them, whereas Jolt would need to get a 6-0 just to tie them, and that's not including if they won that week. So that's a big reason differential is a huge part, and another reason is that I feel like Shardy's a little bit more confident in his team than Jolt. I definitely know that the 2 of them are kind of seeing some flaws in their team, but I think Jolt is seeing a little bit more flaws. He's not quite as comfortable with his team as he was, or as he thought he was through the first 2 weeks. And while I see the confidence in both begin to falter it just seems that Shadi has just a little bit more confidence in his team. He's a little bit more comfortable, and that is why I have Shadi just a smidge ahead of Joel. And it really is quite close.
Yeah, exactly. And finishing it off, obviously there were only really two teams that could be the top right now. I think these are easily the two best performing teams, being the Cleveland Bros and the Maryland Tall Terrapins. I think Kelly is literally like right on Ruby's heels, because these last 3 weeks in particular from Kelly, the 1-0 win over the Skitty, then beating Jolt 2-0, then following up by beating Shardy 2-0. They're two big scalps to have, and then next week he's up against Paul, so he definitely has a tough run ahead. But I think so does Ruby, so that gives Kelly like probably the best chance, I believe, out of anybody to get past Ruby. I still think Ruby's the front runner to win it all, but I think if anybody is going to challenge him at the end of this season right now, it's looking like it's going to be Kelly. It's been interesting seeing his changes that he made to his team. Obviously, the big one being that Kieran Black is no longer there. So, going to be interested to see how he goes with those changes. But so far, it's been working, really well for him, and he's picked up some really important victories. And honestly, we've talked about Ruby enough. We know how well Ruby's been playing and how well he's doing. Obviously, that loss against Jack in week 6 was very surprising, but at the same time, he's still performing very well, just I believe behind Kelly on differential, but I feel like Ruby might have the safer run coming home, so my money's on Ruby to still take the gold by the end of this.
I mean, yeah, they're basically neck and neck in the standings, both 5-2, and while Mono's also 5-2, Mono's a good 3 differential behind Ruby, who is himself 2 differential behind Kelly. Now, it is pretty easy to draw comparison to last PPL season, in which Kelly was near the top or at the top basically all season until the very end, and this is very similar. He's not been quite as dominant through the first 7 weeks as I believe his first 7 weeks were last season, but it is I feel very easy to draw a comparison and say that while, again, Kelly is first place, and maybe his schedule isn't as hard as the others, it's still going to be tough last few weeks, because who knows what the effects of last season's comeback of Mono to beat Kelly in the final week could do to Kelly's mentality. Now Kelly is a mentally tough dude, so he's probably not very affected by last season. So who knows? Maybe he'll completely ignore last season, blow everybody away the last 4 weeks, and claim that championship. Or maybe Ruby, despite everybody's thoughts on him in the preseason, he could rise up and become the unlikely champion. While I did like his team, there was definitely he definitely was one of the underdogs in terms of coaching ability, I feel, and for him to rise out of basically almost nowhere with a very good rain team. Again, a really similar story to Kelly last season, who had a pseudo rain team and rose up after a bad season to almost claim the championship. So these are 2 very, very likely or very close stories, and it'll be a fun last 4 weeks for sure. Who knows what's going to happen, but it's definitely going to be probably the closest race the PPL has seen maybe ever.
For sure, and as analysts, that's probably the most exciting thing for us to see. But that is going to wrap up week 7 of Power Rankings. Again, guys, we apologize for a bit of a delay in these, but we will be back on schedule from now on, and we will see you again for week A rankings. Trev, anything you want to say before we close off?
Not much. Just go ahead and make sure you check out the coaches. I know we didn't do quite as much analysis on the actual battles that we usually do, and that'll probably become a theme for the last 2 weeks, as we're more focusing on a coaching and a standings perspective, with the championship being right in the cusp of everybody's hands. So look forward to that. But other than that, got nothing else to say.
Yeah, that's the thing I just want to address as well. People may be a bit annoyed that we don't talk about the games much. You have to remember that we have another show on the PPL channel called Weekly Recaps, where we have great analysts that are on there recapping all the games that happen. So we don't want to deprive them and deprive you of seeing that, because they put in a lot of work for that. So our job is more just looking at the games that have happened, kind of analysing the coach's performances, not necessarily looking at all the plays and all the things that happened in them, but looking more at the effect of the win or the loss. That's the more important thing for us when it comes to rankings. So I implore all of you to go check out the weekly recaps every time they happen, and then come and check out the power rankings. I think that's the best way to do it. Wouldn't you agree, Trev?
I definitely agree. That way you are fully informed on both the games themselves and possibly even coaches' thought processes that we might try to dissect.
For sure. But with that, that is going to do it for us, guys. Like Trev said, make sure you go check out all the coaches that are a part of the PPL, be it D1, D2, also all the analysts that are part of that as well. Make sure you subscribe to the PPL channel if you haven't already, or subscribe to all of the coaches and analysts that are a part of this. We will be back next week with the Week 8 D1 Power Rankings. We only have 4 weeks left now, Trev. It's getting to the meaty end of the season, and I'm very excited to see how this finishes up. But that's going to do it for us, guys. It's Virgin Trev, and we'll catch you next week.